So now that we know what the news is that it's objective, it's factual, it's without bias as much as possible, and that it's balanced, that you have all those sides, we can also look at what makes something news. And this is what's known as news values. The more something has as a news value, the better. The more likeliness that you'll have a larger audience to read your information. So one of the first news values is that its timeliness is when it comes out. People want to know what's happening now, all right? If it happened last month or last year, it's not news anymore. It's history, and that's not what we want to focus on, especially with the onslaught of social media. News happens like this. So if you're at a baseball game or a basketball game or at a parade or something, and someone says something or scores a goal, you want to be able to tweet that out as fast as possible, because that's where the news comes from. It comes from those instant moments, and the sooner you can get that news out, the more accurate and better it is. All right. So often the most newsworthy element in the story is the most recent happening. So it's the latest occurrence that relates to the news event. So you can have something that's been going on for a long time, but really the news is that last piece of where that information is going. One of the other things that makes news value is proximity, where that story is happening in relation to your audience. So for instance, if we're writing about something here at Sohegan High School, our audience is Sohegan High School. And so those are the people that we want to connect with as much as possible. But our audience and the proximity to the high school is the town of Amherst and Mount Vernon, and Hillsborough County, New Hampshire. And if we kind of build those out, those becomes our different audiences. So with all other things being equal, something that is happening in a person's school or neighborhood, town or city is more meaningful to them about if something was happening in a different town. So we want to make sure that proximity plays a big role in what we talk about here. All right. The next thing is also impact and consequence. So stories that have a large impact on the audience is what's important. All right, or something that will change their lives. One of the things that's been in the news recently is the water problem. We've been suffering from a drought, and one of our rivers in a neighboring town, the wells have been polluted by a factory. That's an impact story. That's there's consequences to that information. We're talking about a drought where there's lack of water, so the plants aren't growing, the lawns are all dying. Food is not scarce yet, but of course, those are the things that we're looking at. So we want to make sure that impact and consequence is something that we want to look at as well. All right. And it's something that we always love is a good conflict story, and unfortunately this is just too much. There's too many of these in the news about people getting shot, conflicts in the Middle East, terrorism, all those things are stories of conflict. And we're drawn to those arguments for whatever reason, and we find it fascinating. And so those are your war stories, and they're interesting, and hopefully it's something that we won't have to write about a lot for our high school paper. But it's something that we could, build some ideas around. Prominence and celebrity is a great part of our news cycle nowadays, where celebrities are being interviewed and discussed for their reactions or their actions, and people love to read about those things. The tabloids are one, but they're also kind of focused on within the news as well. But prominence and celebrity also happen on that proximal scale too. You can have local celebrities in town, people who are well known for their achievements or accomplishments, have a bit of a celebrity status as well. So you want to make sure that you're thinking of all those people. So the other one, news value, is oddity and rarity. Something just weird happens out there. Like someone finds a snake in their toilet, or a bear in their backyard, and they're eating the bird feeder, and they get into the house. Something that's odd and rare and novel also makes the news very interesting as well. And then human interest and emotion stories. There's a lot of that going on here at the high school, and we all have a great well of stories about people who are doing things that are pretty impressive, and we want to build those stories up a little bit. Those are what's called human interest or emotional stories. And those are the stories that inspire people or make them angry or cry or feel sympathy. We have a lot of those happening here at the school, and that's one area that we should focus on. And then currency. This means that often stories that are news simply because a lot of people are talking about it. Deflategate was news, things like that, where it was just a current issue, and now that it's over, it's not. I feel like, personally, I feel, and I'm not downgrading the severity of any of these things, but it seems like every summer there's a new deadly disease that comes out that people are talking about for an expansive time, and then next year there's this other disease that comes about. So it's like this current cycle. The other ones that are less severe would also be people like Miley Cyrus, or the birth of the royal baby, things like that just are news just because people are talking about them. So the term news value is used to describe whether a particular story is news. And when a story has one or more of the elements of news, it has news value. But some stories have more value to readers than others. So the more value they have, and the more kind of boxes of the values that we just talked about, the better, right? Those make for a better story. So just as a rule, the rule of 8 are the different news values. Is it timely? These are the things that you should think about. Is it timely? Is it happening nearby? Does it affect the readers or viewers? Does it have some sort of consequence on their life? Is it about someone who is well known? Is it odd, rare, or just weird? Is it about a conflict or disagreement? Does it tug at your heartstrings somehow? Or is it something everyone is talking about on social media or other news media? And those are the big rule of 8. Okay. In addition, there's some other ones for newsworthiness. You always want to remember who your readers are, and some stories appeal more to teens. So you got to remember that audience of who we're looking at. We're primarily looking at Sohegan High School students or high school students, and their audience being them, plus the parents, plus the community members. We kind of build outwards that way. Our policy, sometimes publications may choose not to report on something that would otherwise be newsworthy because of certain policies. And for example, names of rape victims or children who are involved in crimes. Those are part of the policy that we use here. We also don't really publish profanity. So we want to make sure that whatever is newsworthy, we're actually looking at our own policy as well. And then the competition, it's a 24/7 news cycle. So as we're putting stuff out, we want to make sure that we're the first ones there, or other news publications. It's always good to watch and read what others people are covering as well to get good ideas. All right, and then finally, presentation. We got to look at how it looks. What does it look like on paper? What does it look like on a screen, on your phone, things like that. A great photo tells a story in itself. So any story that you tell, regardless of its news value, has to have a good picture with it, and it has to have a catchy headline, or something that kind of attracts the eye as much as possible. So now that we've gone through all of those, what I would like for you to do is to take the news value test that is attached into the I-39 right below this link. It talks about the news value, and there's more than one or two news values placed in those as shown on the sheet. So first do the worksheet, and then do the news value test, and that will be graded. So we're going to start by talking about what the news is, and as a kind of a precursor to our work throughout the year. News is a great place to start off, again, because it's the basic of any story. It's the who, what, where, when, and how, and you need those building blocks for whatever type of story you're doing, whether it's a video, a fiction story, nonfiction profile pieces, all of those, or even a review or a preview. It all falls under those categories of answering those basic questions. And that's really what the news is. It's quick information, getting it out to people in a factual basis. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that is. All right, so the news is, for the most part, anything that will make people talk. That's the basic one. All right, it's usually informative and it's interesting. So whatever interests the reader is kind of news, and that's why we get kind of caught up in our tabloids. And it is news in a way, but it's not hard-hitting factual news. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. Can something be news even if it's not important? I don't know. Can it? for some people, yes, I would say so. What Kim Kardashian is wearing from one day to the next could be news for someone, as long as it interests that individual. It's something that they want to hear about. If you know what your audience wants, you cater to the audience. And one more thing, the news is factual, and that's the most important part, is that you're telling the facts of a situation. You're not making things up. And of course, like I said earlier, this is going to change a little bit when you want to start writing fiction or poetry. But for now, one of the most important pieces is that you're looking at things that are factual. So accuracy is one of the most important parts of telling a good, or writing a good piece, or telling a good piece. You want to get your facts right. It's just that simple. You want to make sure you double check your facts and that you are checking for accuracy. So there's a difference between fact and opinion, and a great example is telling the temperature. So in a weather report, we get the facts, something that can be verified, it's measured, or could be proven. So example is it's 78 degrees out. An opinion would be is that 78 degrees for some people, it's just too hot outside. I'm not one of those people. I love the hot weather, but it's just the idea of the viewpoint. Whether or not someone agrees with you, it becomes an opinion piece, and that's okay. We can also write opinion pieces, and we'll do that later on, but it's really the difference between fact and opinion. So here are some tips for accurate reporting. You want to verify each fact and quote as best as you can. If you doubt about anything, check in with your sources. Again, whoever you're writing about, just check in with them. People really appreciate that. They'd rather see that than a published piece where they were misquoted or something. One of the most important things is to double check spellings of names, as well as grade levels and titles and things like that. You want to refer to official documents listing the information, or get the correct spellings directly from the person that you're interviewing or your source. One of the things that I always encourage students to do is the first question being, could you please spell your name when you interview someone? Make sure that you're asking that they spell your name. Then you can always Google stuff to double check that way, and also make sure you're looking at a calendar and making sure that you have the dates correct. Right? So there's a difference between objective reporting and subjective reporting. Objective reporting is to be fair in news reporting. So you must always report on just what the facts are. And to be quite honest, the more you do that, usually the easier the article is, the more you start getting into your own subjective ideas. You run the risk of not being a reliable source of information. Okay? And I want to stress this again, you can't let your own personal opinion or your feelings about a subject affect what you're reporting on. So objective reporting, again, doesn't refer to what you're testing on or what you have to learn today. All right? Objective means not influenced by personal feelings, interpretations, or prejudice based on facts. All right? And it's unbiased. It's the opposite of subjective. And subjective means placing excessive emphasis on those moods and attitudes and opinions that surround a topic or yourself. All right? So we're looking to be objective as possible in our news gathering information as we can. And if you're doing a subjective, you're not being fair. The difference between objective reporting is when we tell the facts, and then subjective, it becomes the idea of kind of editorializing a story. All right, and when you begin to do that, you could say things like, if you go to a pep rally and say that everyone had a great time, you're editorializing that information. Okay, there's always that one person in the stands who just broke up with their boyfriend or girlfriend, and they're crying in the corner. Or someone's having a bad day. They're not having a good time at the pep rally, so we can't use those generalizations, right? But what you can do, so you prevent editorializing, is just reporting on what you saw and what you heard, not what you think or what you feel, all right? And if you're editorializing, you're not objective reporting, you're not being fair. Again, we do have a place for editorials and opinion pieces. We want those too, but as our first exercise with the news and telling us a good story, we're going to shy away from those until later on in the year. All right? Another part of being objective is that you are balanced in the information that you're getting out to your audience. So, for instance, if you have a two-sided kind of problem where you have a party of people that are on one side and a party of people of other, you want to get interviews from both those groups of people. So you want to create that balance between the two. And you want to make sure that you're covering all sides of an issue. Maybe it's just not two people that are in an argument or debating something, maybe there's a third person. And so you want to, as many of those resources you can get into an article, the better. All right? And then you want to make sure that your sources are the people that provide the right information. So that means if you want to talk to someone about a new turf field that's being put in, you're going to want to talk to the athletic director. If you say, for instance, if the new turf field is put in and you want to get information about it, you're not going to talk to the new freshman, Joey, who just came in and had his first freshman practice on the field. That might be a piece to it, but you want to get the people who have the most information and go with what you know, right? And being balanced means being fair. It means you cover all those perspectives, and it means that you're being objective. Again, you want to be accurate as possible. Sometimes two sides aren't equal. Maybe you have more facts from one side or the other, but that's what you got to work with, and you got to use your best judgment in order to figure that out. A newspaper can't really congratulate itself on having got at the facts impartially when it has quoted at length from two uninformed idiots on opposing sides of an issue. All right, he's an editor and publisher who said that. So it's the idea that if you're quoting or misquoting the wrong people, you're still not doing the service of getting the information out. Okay? And so, just as a review, the news it's interesting, it's informative, it's factual and accurate, and it's both fair, meaning that it's objective and balanced. Okay? So that is the first video on news, and the next one we're going to look at what news value is. So how does news fall into these different categories?